1.2 Exchange Entitlement. In a market economy, a person can exchange what he owns for another collection of commodities. He can do this exchange either through trading, or through production, or through a combination of the two. The set of all the alternative bundles of commodities that he can acquire in exchange for what he owns may be called the exchange entitlement of what he owns. The exchange entitlement mapping is the relation that specifies the set of exchange entitlements for each ownership bundle. This relation, E-mapping for brevity, defines the possibilities that would be open to him corresponding to each ownership situation. A person will be exposed to starvation if, for the ownership that he actually has, the exchange entitlement set does not contain any feasible bundle including enough food. Given the E-mapping, it is in this way possible to identify those ownership bundles, call them collectively the starvation set, that must thus lead to starvation in the absence of non-entitlement transfers, for instance, charity. E-mapping, starvation sets, and related concepts are discussed in Chapter 5 and are formally analyzed in Appendix A, and here we are concerned only with the underlying ideas. Among the influences that determine a person's exchange entitlement, given his ownership bundle, including labor power, are the following. 1. Whether he can find an employment, and if so, for how long and at what wage rate. 2. What he can earn by selling his non-labor assets, and how much it costs him to buy whatever he might wish for. 3. What he can produce with his own labor power and resources or resource services he can buy and manage. 4. The cost of purchasing resources or resource services, and the value of the products he can sell. 5. The social security benefits he is entitled to, and the taxes, etc., that he must pay. A person's ability to avoid starvation will depend both on his ownership and on the exchange entitlement mapping that he faces. A general decline in food supply may indeed cause him to be exposed to hunger through a rise in food prices, with an unfavorable impact on his exchange entitlement. Even when his starvation is caused by food shortage in this way, his immediate reason for starvation will be the decline in his exchange entitlement. More importantly, his exchange entitlement may worsen for reasons other than a general decline of food supply. For example, given the same total food supply, other groups becoming richer and buying more food can lead to a rise in food prices, causing a worsening of exchange entitlement. Or some economic change may affect his employment possibilities, leading also to worse exchange entitlement. Similarly, his wages can fall behind prices, or the price of necessary resources for the production he engages in can go up relatively. These diverse influences on exchange entitlements are as relevant as the overall volume of food supply vis-à-vis population. 1.3 Modes of production. The exchange entitlements faced by a person depend, naturally, on his position in the economic class structure as well as the modes of production in the economy. What he owns will vary with his class, and even if exactly the same E-mapping were to hold for all, the actual exchange entitlements would differ with his ownership position. But even with the same ownership position, the exchange entitlements will be different depending on what economic prospects are open to him, and that will depend on the modes of production and his position in terms of production relations. For example, while a peasant differs from a landless laborer in terms of ownership, since he owns land, which the laborer does not, the landless sharecropper differs from the landless laborer not in their respective ownerships, but in the way they can use the only resource they own, vis-a-vis labor power. The landless laborer will be employed in exchange for a wage, while the sharecropper will do the cultivation and own a part of the product. This difference can lead not merely to contrasts of the levels of typical remuneration of the two, which may or may not be very divergent, but also to sharp differences in exchange entitlements in distress situations. For example, a cyclone reducing the labor requirement for cultivation by destroying a part of the crop in each farm may cause some casual agricultural laborers to be simply fired, leading to a collapse of their exchange entitlements, while others are retained. In contrast, in this case, the sharecroppers may all operate with a lower labor input and lower entitlement, but no one may become fully jobless and thus incomeless. Similarly, if the output is food, for instance rice or wheat, the sharecropper gets his return in a form such that he can directly eat it without going through the vagaries of the market. In contrast, the agricultural laborer paid in money terms will have to depend on the exchange entitlement of his money wage. When famines are accompanied by sharp changes in relative prices, and in particular a sharp rise in food prices, there is much comparative merit in being a sharecropper rather than an agricultural laborer, especially when the capital market is highly imperfect. The greater production risk of the sharecropper compared with the security of a fixed wage on the part of the agricultural laborer has been well analyzed. See Stieglitz, 1974. But a fixed money wage may offer no security at all in a situation of sharply varying food prices, even when employment is guaranteed. In contrast, a share of the food output does have the security advantage in terms of exchange entitlement. Similarly, those who sell services, like barbers or rickshaw pullers, or handicraft products, like weavers or shoemakers, are, like wage laborers, more exposed, in this respect, to famines involving unexpected rises of food prices than are peasants or sharecroppers producing food crops. This is the case even when the typical standard of living of the latter is no higher than that of the former. In understanding general poverty, or regular starvation, or outbursts of famines, it is necessary to look at both ownership patterns and exchange entitlements, and at the forces that lie behind them. This requires careful consideration of the nature of modes of production, and the structure of economic classes, as well as their interrelations. Later in this monograph, when actual famines are analyzed, these issues will emerge more concretely.